Welcome everyone, my name is Umberto and today I would like to introduce you to our investigation of denial of service attacks in the context of the Internet of Things with the MQTT protocol. This work is a collaboration between the Security and Trust Unit of the Fondazione Bruno Kessler Research Facility and the Italian National Research Council. I'd like to begin by introducing the context of our research. There's plenty of security gaps and privacy issues that surround the IoT domain. The incorrect adoption of IoT protocol and security guidelines, the lack of warnings when developing a product that is not secure by design and by default, that is when launched on the market, then the use of resource-constrained devices that prevent adopting the current security best practices, such as the use of TLS, and when they actually would, the adoption of libraries and configuration that do not enforce them. More generally, there is a trade-off that prefers lower cost, higher usability and time to market over securing the product lifecycle. As a consequence, attackers will try to exploit those gaps to exfiltrate data and, if they are not able, they will probably target the device or service availability. Our approach to mitigate a DoS attacker capabilities in the context of IoT was to investigate one of the most widely used IoT protocol, MQTT. Then identify ways to attack the MQTT devices and test those attacks in widely available MQTT implementations. Ultimately, integrate the lessons learned in a tool that developers could use to secure their MQTT environments. Let us briefly summarize the features of MQTT. It is a publish-subscribe messaging protocol designed for resource-constrained devices that communicate over unreliable networks. It is based on TCP and standardized by OASIS in 2014 and 2019. The last version, MQTT5, have been integrated in most implementations only since last year. MQTT prescribes to entities, clients that connect and publish messages on topics that can be described as message queues, or connect and subscribe to topics to receive those messages. Then there's a broker that handles the sessions and message exchange. Reliability is enforced through 3 levels of quality of service, independent between the different clients. Clause 0 have no guarantee of message delivery, while Clause 1 and 2 guarantee, respectively, that the broker will receive or deliver to the subscriber at least 1 copy or exactly 1 copy of the message. If adopting at least Clause 1, it is possible to connect and request the broker a persistent session. In case of connection issues, when reconnecting, the client will automatically receive unacknowledged messages for its past subscriptions. If we delve in the OASIS protocol specifications for both MQTT versions, a security section identifies the IoT attack surface, and DoS is among the listed possible attacks. However, if we were to summarize the OASIS recommendations, it is the protocol developer, and ultimately those who adopt MQTT, that are responsible for any network, privacy, authentication and authorization mechanisms, according to the specific context, with the possibility of leaving everything open by default. The security section also reports the abnormal behavior to trigger appropriate alarms. However, none of them really deal with DoS, such as monitoring the size of exchanged messages or throttling the requests. More specifically, there is no mention of possibly misusing the handling of messages in queues to perform those attacks, and this has been the focus of our work with respect to both broker and connected clients. Considering that by design the broker will deliver a single attack message to all connected and subscribed clients, and the effectiveness of an attack increases with the number of clients involved, we can classify this attack as an amplification. To the best of our knowledge, we are the first to introduce the notion of amplification attack in the context of MQTT. This lack of guidance for developers does not lead to secure the message queues in out-of-the-box configurations. We identify the 2 possible attacks towards the broker. The first one starts with identifying the maximum message size supported by the broker or the underlying machine, then allow the storage of messages in memory or on the disk, depending on the implementation, by subscribing and forcing the disconnection of 1 or more clients. Ultimately, we publish many heavy messages and monitor for the use of RAM or disk and eventual broker issues. The second attack identified the maximum size but also tailored the rate of publishing according to the number of messages queued by default in the broker. Then, a set of clients is launched and continuously published on specific topics. The number of those publishers depends on the attacker machine. We increase it until the CPU reaches 90% usage. Here, we monitor for the use of a CPU and memory and network performance. We then repeat the test with the use of a subscriber to assess the impact when the broker also have to handle their message queues. To attack the MQTT clients, we propose a similar approach. However, after sending a number of messages equal to those stored by default in the broker message queues, we reconnect the clients and assess if they receive all messages or keep attempting the receival unsuccessfully with higher CPU usage. During the test, we also evaluate the impact of securing the channel with the TLS, using MQTT5 or the access control lists, as they are typically supported by MQTT brokers. We adopt two testbeds, one with a set of Raspberry Pis and one that simulates many more clients via Docker containers. We decided to assess out-of-the-box brokers configurations as, considering the showdown search engine, the majority of MQTT brokers publicly exposed to internet reply to connection attempts with code 0, that is, they do not enforce any authentication or authorization mechanisms. Therefore, we believe in either ways to prevent those attacks. We decided to adopt three widely used and assessed MQTT broker implementations: Mosquitto, VernMQ, and MQX. They all support MQTT versions 3.1.1 and 5, and Mosquitto is single-threaded while the others are multi-threaded. Mosquitto and VernMQ are both secure by default, while in MQX there is no restriction with respect to unauthenticated clients. They all support settings, typically disabled by default, that would prevent the capabilities of those attackers. In particular, VernMQ allows DoS via message queues as it stores the messages by default on the disk, and MQX queues all messages irrespectively of the quality of service. However, MQX limits by default the payload size to 1 MB and throttle requests. Another issue is with features that, if misconfigured by the unguided developers, would actually support a DoS attack, such as automatically upgrading the quality of service. When attacking the broker resources, in particular the storage of messages, the most important settings are the number of messages queued by default, 100 in the Mosquitto version under test, and the maximum allowed message size, 255 MB in Mosquitto and VernMQ, and only 1 MB in MQX. Those parameters allow to easily saturate the RAM and swap spaces in Mosquitto, and have the broker process killed by the system. In VernMQ, this attack requires an increasing number of publishers, but here it is also possible to attack the disk, as the broker uses it to store unacknowledged messages. In MQX, the size is limited, and even if changing the configuration, sending bigger messages takes an unfeasible amount of time for an attacker due to the default throttling, so we will say it is only possible in the long run. When attempting to attack the CPU usage, we tailored the request to two attacker configurations: the publishing rate according to the default queue size in Mosquitto 1.6.9, then 100 per second, the payload size to account for resource-constrained devices, 64 random characters. Then we increased the number of publishers until reaching 90% CPU usage on the attacker machine, that is 400 clients simulated with Apache JMeter. A second configuration increases the publishing rate but has to decrease the number of publishers to avoid being throttled by the network. Although VernMQ and MQX allow for more queued messages, we maintain the same publishing rate among all brokers to allow more fair comparison. In both configurations, the attack has a bigger impact on VernMQ and MQX, as all CPU cores are involved equally, while in Mosquitto only uses one core. The increment on CPU usage when using the subscriber is particularly evident in MQX, 16% on average and 36% in the worst case. In the worst case of the second configuration, this broker reaches 80% CPU usage on all cores and 93% on one core. Considering the test results, it is reasonable to assume that the CPU usage will further increase if adopting a less powerful broker server, such as in edge computing environments, or if increasing the publishing rate with a more powerful attacker server and network connection. Additional tests are provided in the paper and as complementary material. As part of the investigation, we discovered and reported a bug in Mosquitto with respect to the handling of LWT messages, a special type of message set by the client that will be published automatically by the broker in case the client connection is abruptly closed. Even if limiting the payload size, it was possible to send bigger messages. This has been notified and patched by the developer. When attacking the MQTT clients, we used one of the most widely adopted libraries, Eclipse Paho, and obtained the following results. The use of TLS strongly affects the maximum message size and processing time. In case of NQX, we modified the configuration to theoretically allow the maximum message size, but were only able to receive 25 MB messages. The maximum message size was only received in Mosquitto and VernNQ without adopting TLS. In general, the processing time with TLS is around 10 times longer. We discovered the issue with the maximum message size when using the Raspberry Pis to be related with Paho, except in the case of NQX. We notified it to the Paho developer. During the tests, an attacker is able to prevent the client from receiving potentially critical messages or overheating the client by periodically sending one message of the maximum supported size. Finally, there is no difference in those tests in terms of performance between different TLS versions and MQTT versions or if using the access control lists as an authorization mechanism. Considering those results, we attempted to scale the tests by adopting Docker containers. We simulated up to 200 subscribers that connect to Mosquitto and attempt the receiving of 100 messages with a payload of 1 MB or 64 characters, always to account for resource-constrained environments. The tests, that have been performed 10 times, highlight that there is a linear increase in the time to receive the messages when increasing the number of subscribers. The 1 MB tests also present message loss, as in different test runs a subscriber was not able to connect and receive its messages. As with the Raspberry Pi, there is no difference if using the access control lists, but, considering those are small messages, only a marginal impact due to TLS. We used all the experience we gained by investigating Mosquitto, VernNQ and NQX to improve MQTT-SA, a security command line tool developed in the Security and Trust Unit of FPK to assess MQTT environments and suggest adequate security measures in terms of recommendation and code snippets. It is an open source tool, and I'd be glad if you want to try it. The tool allows for a comprehensive assessment with the different tests for different possible vulnerabilities. In the context of this work, we enhanced the DoS component with 2 additional tests that detect the maximum message and queue size and would allow the attack reported in this work. We also improved the suggestions for developers in the report to include, in case it detects one of the 3 brokers, the specific set of anti-DoS parameters. To summarize our contributions, we identified the 2 simple but effective DoS attacks that misuse MQTT message queues and target the broker or connected clients. In our test, the attacks on message storage was effective towards the use of RAM against every broker under test, in particular Mosquitto, towards the use of disk with respect to VernNQ. The use of CPU was noticeable on all brokers, but in particular with NQX, where we can consider the attack successful. When attacking the clients, it was possible to force the use of a CPU core at 100% for extended periods of time and prevent the receival of additional messages. As part of our investigation, we identified and reported the 2 bugs, one in Mosquitto and another in Paho. We also derived the set of parameters that would prevent or foster, if misconfigured, possible DoS attacks. The attacks and security parameters have been finally integrated in the security tool MQTT-SA to increase the security awareness in MQTT-based deployments. As future work, we plan to investigate new features available in MQTT 5 with respect to DoS attacks, extend the assessment to additional MQTT clients and brokers, and develop a mechanism to automatically tailor the tests to the testbed capabilities.